Imagine you're stranded in a freezing blizzard. The temperature is just plummeted. Your jaw is totally clenched shut, and your shoulders are, hiked all the way up to your ears.
Oh, yeah. Your muscles are just completely locked up in this desperate attempt to conserve whatever heat you have left.
Right, exactly. Now imagine someone walks right up to you in the middle of all this misery and they try to tickle you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't laugh.
I mean, no, you'd probably want to punch them.
Totally.
It would literally feel like an assault because, well, your nervous system is in pure survival mode, and this person is demanding this playful response that your biology simply, it cannot produce at that moment.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're joining us because our mission today is to look at exactly that. Why our neurological response to cold, whether that's physical or emotional cold, completely shuts down our capacity for joy.
And more importantly, how to actually reverse that shutdown.
Yes, and we are drawing our insights today from a really surprising piece of source material. It's a children's narrative titled Tales That Tickle Yeti's Warm-Up Wiggle.
Which I know on the surface, analyzing a story about a Yeti might sound like just a purely playful exercise.
Bit silly.
Right, a bit silly. But the architecture of this narrative actually contains a meticulously structured blueprint for understanding biomechanics.
And mood regulation.
Exactly. It takes this very sophisticated concept of how our physical states dictate our emotional availability, and it maps it out perfectly for you.
We're basically going to explore how a magical Yeti, who is facing this massive environmental crisis, reveals the exact sequence of kinetic and emotional steps that we need to pull ourselves and the people around us out of a deeply entrenched bad mood.
It's surprisingly profound stuff.
It really is. So the narrative transports us high into these snowy mountains to a place called Giggle Peak, and the environment is established immediately as being highly kinetic and inherently musical.
Yeah, the snowflakes are described as twirling like dancers, and the icicles chime like bells.
Which is such a great image.
Yeah.
And that baseline setting is crucial, right?
Oh, absolutely. The environment isn't just a backdrop here. It represents an optimal state of flow. Everything in Giggle Peak has this physical elasticity to it. There's constant movement.
And living right in the center of this flow state is our protagonist, Tails.
Right.
Tails is a Yeti, but he defies literally every cultural stereotype we have about Yetis. He isn't this isolated, terrifying monster of the harsh winter.
No, the narrative establishes him as the most ticklish Yeti in the world.
Yeah, his primary tool for connection, what he considers his, special magic talent, is this wiggly, giggly tickle tail that he uses to make everybody laugh.
So Tails represents the literal embodiment of joy through physical connection.
Exactly.
But to understand the biomechanical lesson we're digging into today, we really have to look at how that baseline of joy gets disrupted.
Because things go wrong pretty quickly.
They do. The narrative introduces a systemic crisis that perfectly illustrates the physiological connection between temperature, muscular tension, and our emotional states.
Right. So one chilly morning, the entire mountain just goes dead silent. The twirling and the chiming, they completely stop. And this frosty cloud, which the story identifies as the Grump Freeze, just rolls in.
And the specific symptoms of this freeze are vital to our analysis here.
Yeah, everybody becomes serious, stiff, and super grumpy. The immobilization is so severe that even the penguins stop sliding.
Right, and when the creatures who are biologically adapted to thrive in a cold environment are suddenly immobilized by it, you're looking at a total systemic shutdown.
It's bad.
This isn't just a change in the weather, it is a mass physiological freezing.
And the arisal of this Grump Freeze, it mirrors adult life so accurately.
Oh, 100%.
Think about walking into a freezing, high-stakes board meeting. The air conditioning is just blasting. The tension is absolutely sucked away.
Everyone has their arms crossed defensively.
Exactly. Nobody is smiling. And the source material specifically links the drop in temperature to becoming serious, stiff, and grumpy. But for you listening, let's take this a step deeper. Why does a drop in temperature physically lock up our neurological ability to experience joy?
Well, the narrative addresses this directly in its Science and Body Fun section. It synthesizes this biological reality into a literal weather event.
Right.
So when we experience cold or severe psychological tension, which, by the way, the body interprets as the exact same type of threat our sympathetic nervous system engages.
It goes into fight or flight.
Exactly. The body undergoes vasoconstriction. It pulls blood away from the extremities and forces it into the core to protect your vital organs.
So your physical form is literally abandoning the periphery to survive.
Yes, it is prioritizing survival over socialization. And because of that vasoconstriction, your muscles tighten. You lose physical elasticity.
But you need to laugh.
You do. Joy and laughter are fundamentally expansive, relaxed physical states. They require a looseness in the vocal cords, the diaphragm, the facial muscles.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about the literal mechanics of a laugh.
Right. If your autonomic nervous system has locked those muscles down to conserve heat or brace for a threat, you simply lack the physical bandwidth to feel happy.
So the story personifies this perfectly. The stiffness isn't a side effect of being grumpy. The physical stiffness actually creates the grumpy emotion.
Exactly. The physical lock precedes the emotional lock.
That sequence is just fascinating. But knowing that cold causes physical rigidity, well, that creates a massive problem for Tails.
A huge problem.
Because his entire identity, his only tool for problem solving, is tickling. And like we just said, tickling requires physical looseness to work.
Right.
So what happens when this unstoppable force of tickling hits an immovable wall of physical tension?
Total failure. I mean, it just does not work. And this failure is really the most critical pivot in the entire narrative.
Yeah.
Because it teaches us about the limits of humor as a blunt instrument.
So Tails sees everybody frozen and miserable, and he just defaults to his perceived strength. He cheers, tickle, tickle time, and he swishes his tail.
He expects the usual laughter.
But he gets absolute silence. Zero laughs, and his fur droops. He is thrown into this complete identity crisis because his one magic tool is suddenly useless.
Because he's operating under the assumption that a psychological intervention humor basically can override a physiological deficit.
Right, which it can't. So he decides to investigate the source of the problem. He slides past the immobilized grumpy goats, and he climbs all the way up to the top of Mount Mumble.
Which is such a brilliant name, by the way.
I love the name Mount Mumble, because when your jaw is locked from the cold or from stress, you literally can't articulate clearly. You just mumble.
Exactly. It's so clever.
So at the peak, he finds this shivering snow cloud and is mumbling to itself, too cold, too stiff, can't laugh.
And this prompts Tails to have this massive realization.
Yeah, he says, wait, maybe it's not about tickling. Maybe it's about warming up.
That realization right there is a profound breakthrough in conflict resolution. He recognizes that his default strategy is just entirely inappropriate for the biological conditions on the ground.
But wait, I want to challenge this sequence for a second just to play devil's advocate.
Okay, go for it.
We constantly hear the cliche that laughter is the best medicine. And we know that laughing increases your heart rate, right? It gets your blood pumping.
It does, yeah.
So why couldn't the chemical release of the tickle actually be the thing that melts the freeze? Like, why can't Tails just tickle them until their heart rate warms them up?
Because you cannot bypass the nervous system's hierarchy of needs.
Okay, say more about that.
Laughter is a secondary complex response. It requires a baseline of perceived safety. A frozen system, a body locked in vasoconstriction and sympathetic arousal, reads a sudden tickle not as a joke, but as a physical threat. Yeah, it's like a tripped circuit breaker in a house. When a power surge trips the main breaker, the whole house goes dark. You can't just walk into the living room and flip the TV switch back on and expect it to work.
Right, because there's no power.
Exactly. The switch itself isn't broken, but there's no power flowing to. You have to go all the way down to the basement and reset the main breaker first.
And in the human body, resetting that main circuit breaker means regulating the nervous system first.
Yes. If you try to jump straight to the laugh while the person is metaphorically freezing, you really aren't helping them. You're demanding that they perform a complex emotional state from a depleted physical system.
That actually reframes a lot of everyday interactions for me.
How so?
Well, it means when someone we love is entrenched in a really bad mood and we rush to crack a joke or, send a funny video to cheer them up, we might actually be serving our own anxiety about their sadness.
Oh, absolutely.
We want them to laugh so we feel comfortable, completely ignoring their immediate physiological need for comfort.
That is a brilliant observation. We use forced positivity to alleviate our own discomfort.
Yeah.
But Tails realizes that the cloud isn't refusing to laugh out of spite. It physically lacks the elasticity to laugh. The kinetic need for warmth just has to be met before the emotional capacity for laughter can be unlocked.
So, knowing this, Tails completely abandons his tickle strategy. He pivots from trying to spark a psychological reaction to initiating a kinetic somatic intervention.
He stops trying to be a comedian and essentially becomes a somatic therapist.
Exactly. He calls on his friends to help him execute this very specific physical routine. And look at the crew he brings in for this. He recruits Pip the penguin, who wiggles like jelly. He brings in Bouncer the goat, who jumps like popcorn.
And he adds Chirpy the snowbird, who sings silly songs.
Right. And together, they don't just stand there and tell jokes. They stomp, they wiggle, they clap, and they shake to create the warm-up wiggle dance.
And if you consider the specific biomechanics of those actions, stomping, wiggling, clapping, shaking, these are large muscle group activations. They're forms of bilateral stimulation.
It's essentially a protocol for nervous system regulation.
It really is.
The stomping provides heavy proprioceptive input to ground the body, and the wiggling literally breaks up those muscular holding patterns.
The narrative maps out a perfect two-step biochemical reaction here. Step 1 is the mechanical preparation.
Right.
The source's science section explicitly states that movement warms the muscles and improves the mood. By engaging in the stomp and the wiggle, Pip, Bouncer, and Chirpy are increasing blood flow.
They're generating physical heat.
Yes, and signaling safety to the vagus nerve. They are manually melting the physical rigidity.
They're resetting the main circuit breaker in the basement.
Exactly. You got it. Only once that physical baseline of comfort and safety is established does the narrative introduce step 2.
The chemical release.
Yes.
And the text is really meticulous about this sequence. It clearly states that Tails only adds a tiny tickle after the warm-up movement is complete.
And the result is immediate, right?
Immediate. A massive snort. Jiggly erupts and totally shatters the Grump Freeze. The movement creates the physical capacity for the laughter to do its chemical work.
The mechanical steps unlock the chemical happiness. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins and dopamine, those feel-good chemicals the source mentions.
But those chemicals can't circulate if you're frozen.
Exactly. They cannot circulate effectively through a constricted vascular system. The narrative elegantly separates the mechanics of comfort from the chemistry of joy, proving they must happen in a strict sequence.
I love how the success of this two-step process brings Giggle Peak completely back to life. The penguins return to sliding, the goats are bouncing again, the entire kinetic environment is restored.
It's a total reset.
But the real emotional payload of the narrative comes from Tails synthesizing the ordeal. He states the core lesson out loud. Sometimes people don't need a tickle. They just need a little warmth first.
Which really serves as a master thesis for interactive empathy. It moves us away from transactional cheerfulness, the whole I tell a joke, you feel better routine, and moves us toward a model of empathetic accompaniment.
The source material actually builds this psychological framework into an interactive ending designed specifically for the audience.
Which I thought was a fantastic touch.
Right. It breaks the fourth wall, directly urging you, the reader, to physically participate. It tells you to shake your arms, stomp your feet, wiggle your nose, and giggle. It tells you you've got the magic too.
Empowering the reader directly.
Totally. The life lesson presented is that everyone feels down sometimes, that helping others feel comfortable brings back joy, and that kindness plus fun equals the perfect combo.
That's the equation.
So looking at that specific equation, how does the abstract concept of kindness plus fun map to the very physical realization Tails had about warmth and tickling?
Well, it translates the physical metaphor into a really actionable psychological tool. Kindness is the warmth. Kindness is the somatic holding environment. It is the act of making someone comfortable, of acknowledging their emotional stiffness or sadness without demanding that they immediately snap out of it.
It's sitting with them in the cold.
Exactly. Offering the blanket of your presence and patiently allowing their nervous system to thaw.
So it's the complete opposite of demanding they perform joy for you. You are doing the prep work.
You're doing the prep work, and then the fun is the tickle. Fun is the joy introduced only as a chemical catalyst after the baseline of comfort is secure.
That makes so much sense.
And the narrative validates a crucial human reality here. The Grump Freeze is going to happen.
It's inevitable.
It is an unavoidable weather event in our neurological lives. It is perfectly okay to feel down.
So the goal isn't to pretend the freeze doesn't exist.
Not at all. The goal is knowing how to thaw it. The antidote to the Grump Freeze isn't forced positivity, and it certainly isn't solitary magic. The antidote is community action.
Recognizing a frozen nervous system.
Right. Recognizing it, offering the kindness of warmth to loosen the tension, and then sharing the fun to activate the feel-good chemistry. Kindness preps the system, Fun activates the joy.
There's just so much actionable insight here. Let's quickly recap the critical takeaways we've unpacked from this deep dive.
Let's do it.
First, we explored the physiology of the freeze. Cold, whether it's an actual drop in temperature or the emotional tension of a stressful environment, it causes vasoconstriction. It forces our bodies into a stiff, unresponsive survival mode where joy is physically impossible.
And remember, the emotional state of grumpiness is often just a symptom of that underlying physical rigidity.
Second, we examined the mechanism of the warm-up. Forced humor fails on a frozen system. You have to use kinetic movement like stomping or wiggling to break up muscular holding patterns, warm the tissue, and signal safety to the nervous system.
You must melt the physical rigidity before you can introduce the psychological intervention. Like we said, comfort must precede laughter.
And finally, we saw that the kindness plus fun equation is an everyday toolkit for interactive empathy. Kindness is the patient work of thawing the tension, and fun is the spark that releases the feel-good chemicals once the system is prepped.
It completely reshapes how we should approach supporting the people in our lives when they're shut down.
It really does.
It asks us to be patient mechanics of comfort rather than just demanding an audience for our punchlines.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up today's deep dive, though, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to explore on your own.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
It's an idea that builds on the text, but that we haven't explicitly analyzed yet. Think about Tails at the very beginning of this narrative. His entire identity, his perceived value to his community, was built around his special magic talent.
His Tickle tail.
Right. He saw himself as the solitary provider of joy, the hero with the magic wand.
Which is a very common trap for high achievers, or really anyone who views themselves as the fixer in their relationships.
Totally. Yet when a true systemic crisis hit Giggle Peak, his solo magic was utterly useless. It completely failed him. The actual solution didn't come from his special talent at all.
No, it didn't.
It required simple, accessible physical movement, and crucially, it required the collaborative effort of Pip, Bouncer, and Chirpy.
The community.
Yes. So ask yourself, could it be that what we often view as our own unique magical talent, our sharp intellect, our quick wit, our ability to instantly analyze and solve problems, is actually less powerful in a real crisis than simple, empathetic collaboration and basic human warmth?
Wow.
Next time you find yourself staring at a frozen situation, trying desperately to use your magic to force a fix, ask yourself if you just need to put the wand down. Wait, you mean put the wand down and start a wiggle dance with your friends instead?
That is a profound reminder that we don't always need to be magical. Sometimes we just need to be warm.
We just need a little warmth first. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.